right, so we're recording, so you want to start the meeting?
So today is Thursday, July 23rd. It is 6:04 p.m. This is the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. Welcome, everybody. I did want to, did folks get the June meeting minutes that I circulated? Did anyone have any comments or edits?
A little bit.
Okay, sorry, I thought Jackie was saying yes, I have comments. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 25th, 2020?
So moved. Motion to approve the minutes.
Seconded.
Aye.
Thank you. I have to do a roll call for aye. So
Okay.
Brad,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Jackie,
Aye.
Connie,
Aye.
Kate, we're approving the meeting minutes from June 25th. Can you hear me?
Kate, you're muted.
You.
All right, is Kate abstaining from the vote? I'm gonna, Jana, aye.
I think I'm gonna have to change computers. I'm getting really bad reception.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chris. All right, well, I'm gonna, can I still approve the meeting minutes while Kate fixes her audio? Do I have to wait?
Yeah, because I don't think she was, it sounded like that would be majority
Okay,
in favor, so.
great. Thank you. There is also something that I'm supposed to read to you. So let me do it before I forget, which is the city of Easthampton would like to remind everyone that wearing their mask when you cannot maintain at least 6 feet of social distancing is still very important to prevent a surge of COVID-19 and the need to go back to stricter precautions. Please wear your mask, maintain your space, and wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Yeah. That's what I'm supposed to read to you. So I've done my duty. Okay. So do folks want to, would it be helpful? I know we have some of other members of the EDIC here with us tonight to introduce ourselves before we introduce Judy.
Sure, that sounds like a great idea.
Thanks.
Hi, Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. I'm Gwen Morrissey. I'm the chair of the EDIC, and a number of our members are with us tonight. Would you like to out yourselves, y'all?
I'm Chris. I'm a member of EDIC.
I'm Paul. I'm a member of EDIC.
Tom Brown, member EDIC.
Excellent. I'm Jana. I'm the chair of the Housing Partnership.
Kate, I'm a member of the Housing Partnership.
Ken, a member of the Housing Partnership.
Jackie Pereira, member of the Housing Partnership as well.
Connie Denham, I'm a member of the Housing Partnership.
And Brad Riley, member of the Housing Partnership.
Great.
And then Jamie Webb, assistant planner. Everyone, I think, nice introduction, so.
Yeah, that was very smooth, actually. So for a group of people who can't really see each other in the same order. So we are really excited to have Judy with us tonight. Judy Barrett is the consultant that was hired by the city to work on the housing market study and the update to the housing production plan. And she's going to give us an update, I think, of where she's at. And you're muted, Judy, but you can take it away.
I've learned that etiquette around Zoom, that when you mute yourself, and I forget to turn it back off. But anyway, it's nice to see all of you. I do have some slides to go through, and frankly, a bunch of questions I want to ask you. So you don't have to just listen to me for an hour or whatever, because I think there's a lot to talk about. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up my slides now.
Great.
And hope this is as seamless as it was before. Okay.
Wow, nice.
The town is cool. You have some really cool buildings. So what am I going to try to do tonight? Give you a little update on where we are. I want to throw some data at you and get some reaction to it. There's some places in here where I'm going to look back at the housing production plan that was done by PVPC in 2014, because some of the things that were identified in that plan are still true. It's not that long ago. You wouldn't expect some huge change, but then there are things that have changed. And so I guess I also would like to get a little feedback from you folks about the things that didn't happen as a result of the HPP, because there were a number of recommendations in that plan, and it looks like a fair number of them were not able to go forward. So I'd like to get a little, discussion going about that. Because of things that didn't go forward in that plan, and the fact that it looks like it took a while for it to actually go through the approval process locally. I think it was actually approved in like 2015, but the work was done in 2014. So, just as a consultant, when I see things like that, it makes me kind of wonder, are there issues that perhaps we need to be aware of in terms of implementation capacity, political capacity, or whatever? And then the two questions I continue to wrestle with in this project are kind of, what do you want to accomplish with this HPP? I think your request for proposals was kind of clear about that, but I keep asking myself this in light of things I've kind of run into. And then I guess I want to get a sense from you guys about what you think the city can accomplish. There's one thing I absolutely cannot stand as a consultant is writing a plan that's sort of like everything but the kitchen sink. And you end up with a community that's got like so many ideas they don't even know where to start. So I like to write my housing production plans in a very focused way. And that's why I want to get some sense from you about kind of what's happened. I learned a lot from the interviews that we did out there in March, and also the night meeting we had with you folks. So I don't want to cover old ground, but I know more now than I did then too, so as one would expect. Just to remind everybody, Dodson and Flinker is the other part of this team. I didn't ask Peter to join us tonight because I really wanted to focus on the needs assessment, but they're doing, as you may recall in the request for proposals, part of the scope was to do some kind of site studies to maybe look at different types of housing opportunities that might be available to the city in different locations. Some of the things that were specifically requested of us were things like, sort of an approach to accessory dwelling units or infill or small multifamily. So Peter and Dylan Sussman are kind of looking at these 4 properties that are listed on the slide. We kind of identified these working through a list of possibilities with Jeff. So Dodson and Flinker is kind of moving ahead here with this, and there will be we're going to need to have kind of another meeting with you folks to sort of talk about what they're finding as well. And I just wanted you to know that piece is going forward at the same time. It's been a little bit hard sometimes to get some of the things done that we had hoped to do just because of COVID. It hasn't stopped us from working, but it has really, I don't know about you guys, but it has kind of had kind of an interesting effect on us, just in terms of the ease with which you can get information or how easy it is to kind of work efficiently sometimes with folks. It used to be very easy to pick up the phone. Now everybody wants to be on Zoom. Anyway, so just go over maybe some findings. I'm not sure any of this is going to be all that much of a surprise to you folks, but maybe it will. And in any event, even if it's not a surprise, we can have a confirmatory discussion about it. When we do a housing production plan or any kind of affordable housing plan, one of the first things that we look at is the comprehensive housing affordability strategy tables from HUD. That is the best source available for trying to get some sort of factoid information about the number of lower moderate income households in a community, who's paying more for housing that they can afford, It runs a couple of years behind the American Community Survey, which is really a source that we rely heavily on for a study like this, but it's not so far behind that it's obsolete or irrelevant. So what we found from the CHAS, pardon me, I'm going to default to some acronyms here and stop me if I do that too much, is that you have about 2,100 households that are paying more for housing than they can afford, living in your community now. Not surprisingly, the vast majority of those households have lower moderate incomes. And I'll have a slide a little bit later with what those income limits look like. 44% are severely cost burdened. So what that means is they're paying over half their income for housing, whereas sort of typical housing cost burden is that households paying more than 30% of their income for housing. But severely cost burdened households are paying more than half their income just to be able to live where they are. Most of them are renters. That's no surprise. 57% of those folks are lower moderate income renters, and the rest are homeowners. And I've tried to put the numbers in here in addition to the percentages so you can sort of see what kind of quantities we're talking about. Housing cost burden affects 74% of all of the extremely low income people who live in your community and 68% of the very low income. So there's a significant need in the community that is not being met by ordinary operations of the market and clearly not being met adequately by the supply of affordable housing that does exist.
Judy,
Yes, go ahead.
could you go back to that last slide?
Yes, I will.
I'm just curious, the 74% extremely low income, the 715, what percentage, what is that a percentage of? The 21
Lower moderate income households that are, it is 715 is 74% of the total number of households in your community that have extremely low incomes, which are households with incomes at or below 30% of the median for your area. And 68% of the very low income households, which are households with incomes at or below 50%, 68% of those folks, or 720, have housing cost burden.
Okay.
So try to break it out a couple of different ways here.
Okay.
I got a quick question. How does that relate, if you go back to the last, how does that relate to the rest of the towns in Hampshire County? Like, are severely?
I'm going to get there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay,
I'm
no,
sorry.
that's fine. And feel free to stop me at any point. And if I
Okay.
know I've got a slide coming, I'll just tell you, give me a minute. If I don't have a slide coming, I may have egg on my face, but we'll see.
Thank you.
No problem. So then we look at your subsidized housing inventory to try to figure out what had changed. And I don't know what the last subsidized housing inventory is that you guys have seen. These numbers do change. So if I'm showing you something that doesn't make sense to you, this just happens to be what we got from DHCD last month. The SHI, so-called, is up 76 units since the last housing production plan. And so when I talk about that last housing production plan, even though I know it was submitted to the state and approved in 2015, the work was done and completed in 2014. So just to not confuse anybody, when I put that date up there, it's because that's what I'm thinking. That's when the work was completed. So there, according to the data that we had, the SHI is up by about 76 units. And I wanted to just show you where the increases and decreases occurred, because this is not all that much of a surprise to me in a small town that isn't getting a whole lot of development of kind of larger lower moderate income or mixed income developments. You know, when the HPP was finished, Cottage Square and Parsons Village were kind of known. They were coming. They were probably in permitting. People knew those were coming. So those have now been added, but they weren't on the SHI in 2014. You've added some units that are rental units through your housing rehab program. And so those now count, and they were not on the inventory before. The White Brook Meadow condominiums, there's nine units, and there weren't any on the SHI. If I look like I'm looking over this way, by the way, guys, it's because I have my slides up on two computers. The White Brook Meadow condos was listed, but didn't have any units associated with it in 2014. there was a 1-unit project on East Street that was listed 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and is not listed now. And I think that may have been a Habitat for Humanity unit. I'm not sure. You may know a little history about that. And that's actually something I want to follow up with you about. Valley CDC, there are some ownership units. I think it's one ownership unit that's on the inventory today that was not there before. Hilltown CDC, there are housing rehab units that have left the inventory that were on the inventory before. So when you add it all up, you have 122 units that were not listed before and 46 that have disappeared, hence the increase of 76. Anybody have any questions about that?
I do. So what happened to the Hilltown ones? Does anyone know? Or why did they get delisted anyway?
Well,
They were 15-year affordability restrictions that expired. The Hilltown CDC was the housing rehab consultant up till about 2006 or so, maybe 2005. So they're just, all of those have the affordability restrictions have expired.
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, the state changed the way they count housing rehab units.
Yep.
So we didn't get credit for housing rehab units that were done after Hilltown CDC stopped working with us, but it has nothing to do with Hilltown CDC per se.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And Jamie, just real quick, does that mean that those 46 units went back to market rates?
Well, I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
So, I guess to broadly speaking, there were, in some cases, there were affordability restrictions that expired. So they could be market rate or sold as market rate, or they could be rented at market rates. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are that they've sold or changed ownership, or that they're somehow now not affordable. They're just not counting towards the inventory anymore.
And that's the sort of, I think, the take-home point with a lot of this is that the ground rules have changed over time about what counts. The state perspective on this is that they want to see actual development. So many years ago, they started counting accessory dwelling units in Barnstable, that Barnstable was assisting the CDBG funds. And Barnstable had this sort of amnesty program to help homeowners that had illegal units bring their accessory dwelling units up to code. And Barnstable was putting CDBG into those units. So if you ever saw Barnstable's SHI, it would make you chuckle because there's pages and pages of these units, and the subsidy program listed is Secretary's waiver. Because way back when, a previous secretary of DHCD decided to waive the requirement for a long-term affordability restriction in order to encourage Barnstable to invest in safer accessory dwelling units. Well, needless to say, when the Community Preservation Act passed and the word was on the street that, well, Barnstable's getting their accessory units to count, the state said, wait a minute, we don't want to do this. So they now make it very hard to make accessory dwelling units count. And similarly, they've changed the rules around housing rehab units. So they would prefer to see rental units through a housing rehab program count as opposed to ownership, because ownership units can sell much more easily. So some of this is just policy. The other thing I want to point out is that in the last SHI, or rather the one that existed when the housing plan was done 5 years ago, there were no Department of Mental Health group home units on your inventory. Those units may have existed, but DHC didn't know about them, so they didn't list any. By contrast, you had more DMR group home units than you have today. And some of that could be that you had a group home that no longer operates. It could be that the previous number was wrong. The process for counting these DMR and DMH group home units is rather complicated and subject to error. So that also could contribute to some of what you're seeing here. But I think the real take-home point, frankly, is that the only thing that's really elevated this inventory to a significant degree in a way that you can rely on it are Cottage Square and Parsons Village developments, which have long-term restrictions, if not perpetual ones, that aren't going to go away because of a policy change around how housing rehab units count. So I think that's just an important kind of thing to bear in mind, that it's really ultimately development that kind of drives how far you can go to get your subsidized housing inventory up to and over 10%. Anybody have any questions about that? I'm not advocating one approach or another. I'm just don't shoot the messenger, I guess is what I'm going to say. Come on.
Judy.
Yes.
I'm just curious, the data that you got for the SHI,
Yep.
Back in January or maybe December, we got a request to update
Yep.
the our SHI inventory.
Yep.
And so we'd submitted a bunch of new units as part of that and had taken some off. And I personally hadn't heard back. So I'm just curious what the data that you got, whether or not it included that update or if that update was still processing.
It should include the update. They've been doing a statewide update of the SHI all year.
Right.
How much their progress may have been affected by COVID-19, because by the middle of March, no one was working at DHCD anymore, and they're all at home, which is not to say that people aren't being productive, but communication does get a little bit harder sometimes. And I know, because I communicate with Margot Leclerc, who's the sort of the mother of the SHI at DHCD, Margot didn't always have access to the subsidized housing inventory from her home. So, is it raining out there? Because all of a sudden the building I'm in is like, I hope I don't lose power. The lights are flickering. They've been updating it, that's all I can say. And I usually when she sends me an inventory, I would say over the last couple of months, she would tell me this hasn't been updated yet. And I didn't hear that from her in your case. I'd be happy to ask her just to confirm. I'll do that.
Yeah, I guess if you don't mind just sending, we can just compare what I think the SHI numbers should be and what you had. So maybe we can just follow up after the meeting.
I'll send you an Excel sheet because I converted her PDF to Excel so I could do some calculations. So
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay.
So I just got some pictures interspersed in here because, you know, when I was out there in March, it wasn't picture time. It just wasn't good picture weather, but we've been out since. And I have to say, you know, you have some really interesting housing in that town. And I kind of understand historically why that's the case. I don't always get to work in a community that has the kind of particular housing mix that you have. And yet what's interesting to me is that a lot of what you do have seems to defy the restrictiveness of your zoning. And it's something I want to sort of get to as we go on here, is that so much of what your zoning says today is, you know, it doesn't really kind of say what's on the ground, except in the parts of town where newer development has occurred. So I'll get to that sort of the zoning map and some discussion about that in a little bit. But you do have some very interesting housing. And frankly, you have some fairly attractive 40B developments, which isn't always the case. So I think sometimes the ability to work with nonprofits does kind of end up yielding a better product that people feel more comfortable with or something. I don't know. I wasn't involved. I don't want to pass judgment on the developments, but just coming from the outside and somebody who's been dealing with 40B for a very, very long time, I was kind of impressed with some of what we saw, and generally just the mix of housing that exists in your town. So let's look at a few trends. And again, some of this is an extension of what PVPC was alluding to in the previous plan. You know, your population has continued to age, and there's really no surprise about that. That's true in just about every community. People are getting old. They're like me. I'm a boomer. And so when the plan was done a few years ago, The estimate of the population over 65 was 15%. It's now 19%. And it's going to continue to kind of increase because that's what's happening everywhere, with the possible exception of in college towns, which is a different kind of market. There's been significant growth in your community of non-family households, especially one-person households. Over time, I kind of went back as far as 1990, the number of one-person households in your community has increased 57%.
Wow.
And that is significant because it's going to show up in your income statistics. You have continually declining household size, in part because you have this dramatic increase in one-person households, and declining numbers of families, with or without kids, but especially with kids. There seems to be some decline in that population. So we kind of went back, as I said, to 1990, just to see what was going on here, because it's pretty interesting. I want to make sure I can see this chart. Yeah, here we go. And some of this data, of course, would have been in the last plan. I added a few rows because I was particularly interested, but you can kind of see how your single-person households have increased over time. Really, between the last decennial census and the previous one, it was, 17.4%. Before that, it was 30%. You've had a lot of growth in that household type. So your average household size, unsurprisingly, has gone down. If the school enrollment figures on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education webpage are correct, then your school enrollments are declining as well. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that because there's been some kind of a little bit of a drop in families, although households with children, has gone up a little bit since 2010. But then look at the percentage drops that happened previously, 12.6%, 5.7%. So there's clearly kind of a shift going on here in the makeup of your households, some of which is really very consistent with what I see in a lot of other communities.
Judy, do you know if that K through 12 school enrollment is Easthampton residents, or does that include kids at school choice in?
Oh, good question, because that was one of the first things I looked up. The K through 12 enrollment is supposed to include school choice because it is the number of children in your classrooms on October 1, regardless of where they live.
Okay.
Just to clarify that, what about kids that choice out? That's not included in our enrollment, correct?
Yeah, they're in somebody else's enrollment, right?
Yeah.
October 1, everybody takes account. And the K through 12 enrollments that are reported by DESE are based on that October 1 official date. It's sort of like the census being April 1. Well, school enrollment counts are done on October 1. So if you have children who are choicing out to, say, Northampton, they're showing up in Northampton's count.
And that's a good point, Chris, because the last time I checked, we had more kids choicing out than in. So it's going to drive that number down.
Do you know why that's happening?
Why people are choicing out?
Yes. Yeah, I really would like to understand this more.
It's a loaded question, but facilities, if I had to put one word to it. Facilities
play a huge role in it. I mean, last time I checked, Judy, there was something like 6 school buildings in the state of Massachusetts over 100 years old, and I think we had 2 or 3 of them.
Okay, so are they elementary schools?
Yes.
Yes.
And they're about to be, well, as you know, we're in the middle of a new school building project,
yes.
K through 8, so that's going to change that. Unfortunately, people tend to judge a book by its cover.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I would add perception to that in addition to the age. I think there are quite a few families that choice out before their kids even go to kindergarten.
Agreed.
So they decide early that they're going to choice out. So I think there's some perception that also plays into it.
Do you know where they're choicing to? What school districts are attracting your families?
A lot of them are going to the Hilltown Charter School.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say we lose quite a few to charter schools. And I mean, this is my anecdotal data, but like perhaps Southampton.
Okay.
Judy, do you want to know more specifically about that? Because where I work at the Collaborative for Educational Services in Northampton has done a study of where Easthampton kids go when they don't go to Easthampton schools.
Oh, yes, I would like to know.
All right, I'll work on that.
Well, because it has potential market implications. You know, a few years back, I worked on a housing plan for Lenox in Berkshire County. And one of the things that they were sort of grumbling about was that they were getting quite a few kids choicing in from, say, Lee. And the feeling was, well, no one really feels like they have to move up to move into Lenox because they can choice their kids from some other town that's not so expensive. And, you know, and it was this very loaded discussion. I mean, on the one hand, of course, people griped about that, but on the other hand, Lenox was receiving revenue for choicing kids in. So, you know, I don't want to go too far afield of this, but yeah, I would like to understand because it may have market implications that will be important to us.
And just real quick, Judy, I mean, years ago when I was on the school committee, we challenged our legislators, and maybe someday someone will have the backbone to take a hard look at school choice. But we tried like heck to have school choice be an educational choice. And when we did surveys of parents that choiced out, it was facilities, as Chris or Jana said, but it was also, it was on my way to work, so it's convenient to drop them off. Their friends go there. They have sports you don't have.
Yep.
You know, education never hit the radar screen.
That's really interesting. You know, and of course, too, you know, you lose much of your labor force to non-local employment every day. So
right.
If people are dropping their kids off at school because they're on the way to work, in some ways it doesn't surprise me. I was struck by how small your employment base is compared with the size of your labor force. I don't want to go too far with that.
That's probably true. That's probably true of most New England, you know, mill towns, if you will.
It might be. It might be. I mean,
and just real quick, Judy, how do you define family?
Oh, that's another loaded one. The Census Bureau defines family, and of course, I'm going to use the census definition because these numbers emanate from the Census Bureau's ACS. But a family is a household of two or more people related by blood, marriage, or adoption, or other operation of law. So the Census Bureau has, for political reasons, not been counting unmarried partner households, same-sex households, in families. But they do count them by whether they have children. So, you know, in some communities, it's a significant difference. And I think in the next census, you're going to see that change. But this has all been sort of a moving issue with the Census Bureau is what are we calling a family? And I think inside the Bureau, the demographers would like to sort of make an adjustment reflecting the fact that our family households have changed. I'm not sure the politics of the census allow them to actually do that.
It sounds like a very dated definition.
Oh, which, yes, it does. But just so, and I'm glad you asked the question because that is what you're looking at. I also did look at households with one or more people under 18, which is not, of course, a perfect measure of a family because there are families that don't have kids. But I was trying to sort of get at, is there a significant difference here? I didn't pick it up in your community as much as I have in some others, but yeah, you should know that is kind of what that means.
Okay.
So Judy, just to clarify with the families versus single person households, if you have, let's just say, two unrelated people living together who are roommates, does that show up as two single person households or does that show up as one?
Non-family. It's a non-family household of two.
Oh, so that would just show up as households.
Yes.
That's the difference between households and families, or?
So you have to start, household is the parent of everything.
Yeah.
Household is one or more people living together in a single dwelling unit, functioning as a single housekeeping unit. So whoever's living in that dwelling unit, functioning as a single housekeeping unit is a household. And it could be one person or it could be two or more. Mm-hmm. And it includes families, but not all families are all households include families, but not all households are families. It includes single people living alone and other types of non-family households. And I will just say the vast majority of non-family households in your town are reported as single person households.
Okay, so the difference between the single person, if you take the if you add up families and single-person households, the difference between that and the total number of households is what the Census Bureau is counting as non-family households.
Non-family households.
So it could be a LGBT, or it could be just two roommates living together.
Yeah, if you really want to get a picture of it, I did not try to do it with this table, and I'll tell you why. This has been a changing scheme with the Census Bureau. So I can't go back to 1990, for example, and get a table that says, unmarried partner households. It didn't exist. So when I do this, if I'm just ignoring 1990, if I'm looking at just today, I will, because I feel so strongly about it, I will add unmarried partner households to families because they're functioning as a family, even though the Census Bureau doesn't count them that way. This gets even more complicated in that we have unmarried partner households that may have children because someone was married previously to someone else. Well, as long as there's some relative in the household, they're counted as a family, including the non-relatives.
But I think that description you just gave kind of explains the reduction of families and the increase in households.
It might. It very well could. But, bear in mind, yeah, I see what you're saying. It certainly could. But I will point out that the vast majority of your household growth that's not counted as a family is single-person households. And I don't want to lose sight of that.
No, I guess what I was getting at, Judy, and I don't know that I can come up with a good example, and I don't want to belabor this, but
okay.
If there's a husband and wife living in a home,
yep,
and they separate, and then a partner moves in, that's going to shift that number, I believe, from family to household.
It certainly could. If that husband and wife had a child, however, and the child stays with the mom, and the mom brings into her home a partner, then they're still counted as a family.
Okay.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I would not want to work at the Census Bureau and try to sort all this out, just because it gets so political. Anyway, I guess the sort of take-home point I would like to make here is that you have continued to experience household growth. Just as the last plan pointed out, you're continuing to gain households even though your population is flat or slightly declining. And that's because so much of your household growth is single people living alone. And I don't think that's all that much of a surprise given the number of senior households that you have in your community.
Sure, makes sense.
So this is just a little chart that compares by tenure what the household sizes look like here. And you can see from this chart, if you can make out the sort of pale pink that's one-person households, you have a significant number of one-person households in your town. And of course, many of them are renters. That's why I'm saying I think that in some ways there's not that much of a surprise, to me anyway, to some of this information. You have a lot of two-person households, but that's true everywhere. I mean, we just see this over and over again. Household sizes simply are declining. One of my favorite comprehensive plan stories is from the town of Harvard, which some of you may know until 1995 housed a majority of Fort Devens, and all of the Fort Devens military housing was in Harvard. And so back in the 1960s, when Charles Eliot, a famous landscape architect, did a master plan for Harvard, he did a projection to 1990 of what the population would be and how many housing units there would be. And his housing unit projection was right on the money. It was maybe off like 2 lots. I mean, it was remarkable. His housing unit projection was accurate. His population projection was way off. Why? Because in 1965, we had 4, 5, 6-person households. And by 1990, we did not. So this kind of shruggishness in the addition of people, not so much with the addition of households, makes sense to me demographically.
Yeah, surprisingly, this makes sense to me because usually statistics don't all the time. But if you have a husband and wife and 3 kids, they're going to be in this 5 yellowish category. As those kids grow up and leave the home, they're going to move into other boxes, I presume.
Well,
and so,
yep.
And so when you end up with the empty nest of mom and dad, they're in that big number 2 category. And then as they age and one of them passes away, you end up, so this is sort of a cycle of life kind of thing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Listen, I have 9 children, and when my kids all lived at home, there were 11 of us in our house, and we were one household.
Yep.
No, the old lady lives in the shoe. Well, as they all aged and moved out, all of a sudden we created a demand for 10 housing units.
Right.
And so, the moral of the story is that's how household formation occurs.
But as we age, we move through these blocks.
That's right, we do. We certainly do. I also just want to point out, as part of the sort of population changes that are occurring, even though you're not gaining a lot of new people, or you're not gaining a lot of people in absolute terms, and you're continuing to gain households, there are changes happening within the population, such as the aging of your population. That's about people, not so much households, although clearly it can affect who's living in your households. But you've also had some growth in the disability population in your community. And I just sort of wanted to give you a little picture of this, because this also can relate to, and usually does, relate to types of housing needs that to be addressed in a city or town. One of the things I think is important to just sort of see in this is that the percentage of people with disabilities jumps significantly when you get to the older adult population. And yet, the group that has the largest poverty percent is actually the disability population that's working age. So just something to be kind of aware of, that there is a growing percentage or growing presence of people with disabilities in your community, and many of them do not work. Either they can't find jobs, or they're simply not able to be in the labor force. So when I was first reading your request for proposals, one of the things that it jumped off the page for me was Easthampton's added 238 housing units in the last 5 years, and under 100 of those were affordable and were part of 2 larger projects, which we just discussed a few minutes ago. Most were new single-family units built elsewhere. And so, I'm looking at your zoning, and I didn't put a map in here of this, but I was just trying to pull out the districts where single-family dwellings are permitted as of right, and it's kind of the only game in town, and it's sort of like what your zoning asks for. I know you have some other provisions in your zoning to try to encourage something else. The question, I guess, that we're wrestling with as a team is, are those incentives effective enough? Or is the market pull for single-family homes simply too great? But certainly, your regulatory approach has something to do with this. So we'll come back to this, but that, as I read your zoning, it's basically saying single-family homes are what the city prefers.
Judy, is it what we prefer, or is it what's already on the ground?
Well, I think it's some of both, but where, the growth has been occurring kind of on the west side of town, and it's pretty much, if I put a map up, which I didn't in this case, but I mapped where the single-family homes are the sort of percentage, the largest percentage of all, and it's pretty much where the new development has occurred, other than the 40Bs.
Okay. I guess what I was getting at is that's kind of an extension of what's already on the ground. But you're right, the zoning would favor that.
Yeah. So, departing kind of from some of what I'm going to talk about still is sort of findings, but this is more observational on our part, and I do have some questions for you folks. We already discussed this a little bit, but the growth rate, the population growth rate, has continued to decline. That doesn't mean that you've had an absolute drop in population, although it appears that you may have lost a little bit since 2010. But the real point is sort of the growth rate. And as you can see, in many places, including your own community, there was kind of a spike coming out of the baby boom era, where there was sort of this one kind of last push for population growth, and then it starts to really subside. And so you're not all that you're really not inconsistent to any significant extent compared to the county and the state. This is sort of where we are. It's not a picture of housing demand. It's simply a picture of what is new housing and what are new households bringing us in terms of total number of people. The rate is dropping. Your households are changing. I alluded to this earlier. This is not that different from the last HPP, but you can see, in your non-family households, these are households headed by the way, headed by a male or headed by a female. May or may not be one-person households, but just the non-family households headed by women, which in my experience, in a small town or a small city, are often older women, is 25%, and that's significant. Your married couple families, of course, remain kind of the largest cohort. You have some single-parent males in your community that really barely show up 10 years ago. 12% single-parent females is not huge, but it's up there. And non-family household men, 20%. So if you just look at the non-family side of that pie chart, that's a lot of households. A lot of households compared with the rest. This is something I really want to take a look at. Non-family households, your incomes, let me just get over to that slide. I want to make sure I'm seeing it correctly. Yeah. Your non-family households have quite a bit lower incomes than households as a whole. That's not all that surprising because family household incomes tend to be higher. And you can kind of see this. The sort of plurality of your family household incomes are in that 60 to 125,000 sort of band in terms of percentage. There's a lot there. Whereas the non-family household incomes tend to be depressed. Well, because you have so many non-family households, that brings your total household income kind of down. Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. You guys with me?
Yep.
So this is just a snapshot of today. And as I said, most of those non-family households are single people living alone in your community. What's interesting to me is that if you go back to 1990, which I'm going to do on a slide in just a minute, you're going to see that actually in terms of inflation, your households really haven't kept pace with growth in the cost of living. So I just wanted to put this chart up. This is current statistics comparing you with the communities around you, and I guess I didn't put the county in here. I meant to, but yours are in bold. You can kind of see your median non-family income is 41,139. These are estimates based from the American Community Survey in 2018. That's the most recent data we have available. Your median family income is 77,054. So you're not particularly high. Your non-family income is a little bit higher than, say, Holyoke. It's about on target with, say, Southampton. There's more non-family wealth in, say, Westhampton. Median family income, you're on the lower end of the sort of the cluster of communities that you're a part of. And similarly, that kind of has an effect on your median household income as well. So remember, households are one or more people. Families are two or more people. Median family is a mix of one or two, but mainly one. So this is just a picture of kind of where you are in terms of market comparison. But what's really interesting is what's happened to the incomes in your community if you adjust them for inflation. And I think what you can see here is that family incomes actually have dropped since 2010. But if you kind of go back a ways, family income really has not appreciably increased. And as a result of that, the median household income is actually down from 1990. Your per capita income is up. There's the same, inflation adjusters, of course, but you can kind of see from this that when you kind of go back over time, your households are either not doing much better or may in fact be doing a little bit worse. Conversely, your housing costs, if you go back to 1990, your sale prices, your median single family and condo sale prices if you adjust those from 1990 to the present, those have not really dropped. They haven't appreciated dramatically. But the point is that what someone could buy in 1990 is not what they can buy today. They don't have the same buying power. So this is just a snapshot of, this kind of goes back to an earlier slide where I talked about housing cost burdened folks, but this is just a breakdown of the households in your community by the income group in which they fall. And that HAMFI acronym is simply a designation by HUD of the area median family income percent that the households reflect. So less than 30% of the area median family income, 13% of your households fall into that category. And almost 15% fall into what we call the very low income category, which is 30 to 50%. And almost 18% of your households are in the 50 to 80%. So you kind of add that all up, and that's a fairly significant, group. But then you look at yourselves in comparison to Hampshire County, and you have somewhat fewer, very extremely low income households, but you have slightly more as a percentage of the total, very low and low income.
And Judy, I was holding off till the end because I thought you might answer this. Compared to our 2014, do you know if this is an increase? Is this pretty much the same, or?
I don't remember if Jane had this particular chart. I'll go back and check, and I can do a comparison for you in the plan. I can actually just email you tomorrow. I don't remember if she had this particular chart, but I can go back to the CHAS that they used and calculate it for you.
And my specific question about that is, it's a curious slide because we've increased our affordable housing, right? So one would assume that would, we would have less cost burden. At the same time, one of my questions about that is sometimes what happens in tax credit units, which is almost all of what we've increased our housing in, is that weird place where, since it's not fully subsidized. So that's my specific interest in I think if we could pinpoint that number, it might also give us some information about the effect of tax credit units on our rent burdenness.
I can calculate this for you. I'm pretty sure back to 1990.
Okay.
I think I can get that far back with this particular table. So let me take a look. Yeah, I mean, this is a chronic problem, whether it's Easthampton or Belmont. The problem with the tax credit program, which unfortunately is about all we have to work with, at those 60 or 65% rents, they're too much for people who really need a more deeply subsidized unit. And those projects only come with so much subsidy. So, it doesn't surprise me to see, because you're not alone in this, that you still have quite a few housing cost burden people in your community, because what's so-called affordable is not affordable to them. And the other thing I think that's going on too is that you have a fair number of seniors who are still living in homes they've probably been in for a long time, and their incomes have dropped. So relative to income, their housing costs may be too high.
I just have a third question, and I don't know, and this is just what I'm trying to process the data, which is that our housing market prices have increased.
Yep.
So I wonder if you have any thoughts on, are people buying things that are too expensive for them, or?
It looks that way. It looks that way.
Okay.
I've worked in some communities where, especially it's heartbreaking. You'll look at some houses where people that recently turned over, and people have bought a home they can't afford, and they hardly have any furniture, but they've got the address. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that people spend more than they really can afford if they want to be in a particular community. Or it's the most affordable they can find, but they really can't even afford that. So I think there's a variety of things that contribute to that. But I think that the more general comment I would make is that housing prices have continued to escalate with inflation, but household incomes in your community have not kept pace. So that's another factor.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
With your kind of discussion of the tax credit units, right? And then that whatever we are producing is not really hitting the AMI that we're looking for, or the HAMFI.
Mm-hmm.
Will that translate in a recommendation coming out of this somewhere to try to capture or create, units that will hit that? I mean, is that how you envision some of the data, to translate into recommendations?
I mean, yes, I would imagine so. And that recommendation will probably frustrate you guys, because the reality is, to get those units that affordable, you need more subsidy than tax credits. And tax credits projects will typically come with a certain number of, say, Section 8 project-based certificates tied to them. But the need at the most extremely low income level is so great that those units simply don't, there's not enough, I guess.
Right.
So the question then begs, can a community with Community Preservation Act
Right.
essentially become a subsidy source for a rental development, as has been done in other communities?
I think that there is some willingness to at least have that appear as a recommendation, because I think it's hard to produce affordable units with just CPA funds.
Oh yeah.
So if they could complement one of those projects and hit a better income level, that is something that it would be worthwhile to have that as a recommendation.
Yes.
So that if the right couple projects come forward, that would be potential. And I'm just saying, I'm not representing what CPA would do actually, but it could make a viable request to CPA to hit a better income level.
Right. Right.
So Judy, just real quick too, if housing prices are escalating and incomes are flat or down, then I'm assuming that might translate to people buying homes in Easthampton or from out of town.
Could very well be.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
I mean, it might be a case where my son or daughter who lives in Easthampton and falls into some certain category of income can't afford to buy a house in town, but someone living in another community around us where the median incomes are much higher can afford. In fact, Easthampton homes look more attractive to them compared to the community they're living in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that would ultimately be reflected in, not that might not be true, but it would also be reflected in the income levels, because that person then becomes part of the community and then their higher income reflects it. So I think there is a trend that, without understanding it, I think there's something that we do have to say about the decreasing income. Because let's say someone from Northampton decides to move into Easthampton and they have a higher income coming from Northampton, that income should still would affect these numbers. So I think there's something, I don't know how to make sense of it, and Judy would make more sense of it, but I think even if that was the case, we still have some trend to look at here with the deflating.
I would agree with that, Kate. It's just the only issue is it's probably like a pebble in the pond. So it takes a while for that movement to have an impact on the overall numbers.
There's another phenomenon too that I think affects numbers like these. And that is that agencies have tried so hard, agencies and lenders have tried so hard to come up with mortgage products that will make it possible for people to buy their first home. And it's so, a tip of the economy can change everything for a family. You find a house and you've been qualified for MHP's One Mortgage program, which is really obviously the best one out there. So you get your house and you're okay. But then the economy tanks, and now you've got a household that doesn't have enough income. And so a household that may have been barely able to afford that house because of the underwriting criteria for One Mortgage or the newer products from Mass Housing, now suddenly finds themselves in a house that maybe they really can't afford.
Agreed. But, I was speaking with a realtor today.
Mm-hmm.
He has a house just going on the market at $320,000.
Yep.
I wouldn't consider that to be in the affordable category necessarily.
Right.
He has 15 showings tomorrow for that house.
Yeah.
If someone buys that house of that 15, there's 14 more people that were interested in buying that house at 320.
Right. That's right.
I mean, that's back to that supply and demand thing we talked about. There's too many people chasing too few homes.
That's right. That's right. Too many markets competing for the same inadequate supply. One thing I don't have a handle on, and I was hoping you guys could help us with this. I don't know how much the student market might be affecting things in your community too. And the reason I bring this up is that in some communities where they truly are a college town, we have families that are buying units for their kids to live in. And they're just literally paying cash. I mean, they're able to sort of compete for, they're like the first household through the door that the other 14 didn't get that unit. Because families are buying homes for their kids to live in, or condominiums or whatever. And I didn't know if you have any sense about how much the student market pressure along the Connecticut River Valley might be affecting your housing supply at all.
So I don't have anything beyond anecdotal evidence. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that a lot of parents buy and rent homes temporarily while their kids are at Williston.
Exactly. Yep.
But I don't know if that's significant because I only have heard of a couple of instances of this.
Okay.
I would say if you're thinking about UMass, then that's not the case that parents are buying homes here, but there definitely are a number of grad students who live in Easthampton because it tends to be more affordable.
Yep.
And lots of us who work at UMass live here in Easthampton too.
Yep.
That would be an interesting graphic, is to see some data from UMass. I appreciate what Jackie said. I mean, I think that UMass as a regional kind of, university has a lot of pull for faculty.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, there's some, there appears to be some college kids, but it's not the pressure that you might expect, like in Northampton or Amherst.
Okay.
Just, anecdotally.
And I just didn't know how much is spilling over on you guys. Frankly, that's, I guess, what I've been curious about.
I guess I would just add sort of a way to sort of test that is the police reports to undergrad parties and things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that we have a huge problem with noise complaints and underage drinking and stuff like that at house parties. I know that like Amherst has had a huge problem with that, and Northampton has a big problem with that. Not as big, but sort of an indirect measure of the impact on students might be looking at the police reports for underage drinking.
I'm sure that my children contributed to some of that activity in Amherst.
I got a quick question. Are we counting Williston, Northampton dorms as households?
No.
So they're not. And when you get the, when you pull the data for median income, you're not pulling their income either, right?
No.
Okay.
Their income will affect per capita income, but not household income.
Okay.
So can I piggyback on that question? I know that he asked about dorms, but what about the faculty dorms? Is that also not counted?
It depends on whether the Census Bureau, considers the accommodation to be a dwelling unit. So if, for example, I went to boarding school and my dorm had a house attached to it for the house parents. That was a housing unit. No question in my mind. Did I know this at 15? No, but I know it at 66. That was definitely counted as a housing unit. It was freestanding, separate dwelling. It had kitchen and plumbing facilities, etc. If it doesn't have the facilities to support a household unit, then it is considered group quarters, and the occupants are not householders. They are part of group quarters, which is basically people in your community who are not in a household. People who are in your group homes, for example, those are considered group quarters population, not households.
Williston definitely has some units devoted for faculty, so it might be worth clarifying as we go. I had another question too, and I don't mean to jump in too hard on this, but you talked about how a change in the economy could impact, a person's ability to afford where they live. And I'm wondering, through your research, and I know when we had our initial consultation, we talked a lot about the fact that while we are going to benefit from constructing a new school, it increased taxes, substantially in a short amount of time. And I'm wondering if it's something that will get captured in this somehow to show, or, one of the things that we talked a lot about in talking about trying to vote to support the funding for the new school was show some comparative tax rates to other communities. And then, I think it's something that's still nagging at us. And I don't know that we've seen the full impact of it yet. But when you combined what we're going through with COVID right now with the new tax increase, that seems like something that I don't know if it's too real time, but I think it's going to create a shift, some kind of change that it may already be happening, but we don't have any data yet to help understand what is happening.
Well, what would probably be helpful is if I could talk to your assessor and just, if I can pull some data together about what the average tax bill impact has been of the school project, that would be helpful. The problem, of course, is almost everything I'm showing you about households, population, and incomes are from the ACS 2018, and we're in 2020. So there's going to be a little bit of a difficulty here, Jeff, in trying to make apples and apples work. But I think that what I can say is that when the Census Bureau queries survey respondents about their housing costs, taxes are part of the equation for the homeowner population. So if taxes are driving some of the unaffordability, there is sort of a way to tease that out from some of the ACS tables. I can take a look at that, but that's not going to pick up what's happening right now in Easthampton.
Although, Jeff, are you saying that someone might be fine today in their house, paying the mortgage payment, two-income household, everything's fine, and now the increased tax burden is what might make that house unaffordable now?
Yeah, I mean, I would pull it back to like a year ago, basically, whether someone would be fine, household would be fine, right on the edge. I think it's those people that are right on the edge.
Yeah.
And then whether that tax increase, anecdotally, that's what people are saying is happening, and I just don't know if we will have data. If we'll be able to get data in this report, or at least capture what the actual effect of that.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard anecdotally is, I'm not sure, Jeff, how many people are actually selling their home because of the tax burden, because of the financial situation it puts them in, versus because of the consciousness, if you will, of paying higher taxes.
Yeah.
And I can find cheaper taxes somewhere else. The benchmark for me on that is if someone says, I'm selling my house because of the taxes, I'm moving to New Hampshire or Florida or something because of lower tax, or even another town, how fast does that house they're selling sell? And right now, they're selling in 7 to 14 days. Right. So someone somewhere is not afraid of the tax burden.
Yeah, we just got a nudge on the presentation, but I think it would be the renters, right? It would be the renters who might be the most impacted that we.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, thanks.
I would agree with you.
We're getting nudged pretty hard to move on.
I got to think about that. I'll move on, but let me come back to it, but not tonight. It's a fair question. I just need to think about how I can pull that information together in real time. Let me move on. This won't, I'm sure, surprise anybody, but as you've grown and you've changed, you haven't changed in a uniform way. This map is, there's a bunch of these maps. These are based on geographies called census block groups. We took the city and just tried to break it up into smaller areas where some of these tables are available. And the darker the shade in that map, the newer the homes. So this is just telling you what's the median age of the housing in these various parts of Easthampton. And so that light yellow is just, we don't have any data for that, but you can kind of see where the older housing is in the community versus the housing that's newer. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, because I was trying to map this before tonight, but I just didn't finish it, kind of where the housing values are, because I'm sure they must be higher in that part of town. The newer housing is there. In any case, my point is just, you've grown more in some places than others. And that's what the median year built tells you, that there's been more new housing built in some parts of town than others. It's really no surprise. It's where the land was.
I get a question?
Yes.
The rental units in town.
Yep.
The age of those rental units, are they higher than the surrounding towns?
You're such a small community that it probably might look a little newer. If you're comparing yourself to, say, Northampton or Holyoke, I wouldn't be surprised, just because you don't have all that much rental housing. So I'd have to go back and look at the tables on that. You can break down median year by tenure. I can look at that for you.
I'm just curious. I thought if you knew off the cuff, that's fine.
Yeah. But I have the data. I just don't have it on this slide.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And it's just like more imagery. Again, the variety of housing that exists in your community is actually pretty exciting. I think that one of the things that I was thinking about as we were driving around there was how the city might benefit from having some residential design guidelines. And I'm just throwing that out there as a comment. I think that especially for your multifamily buildings, it would probably be very helpful. But anyway,
I'm sorry, I have one more question, and then I'm going to actually have to leave this meeting. But when looking at the age of the rental housing stock,
yep.
One question I have is, would you be including, not that you're built, but do you include rehab? So, for example, I'm looking at one of those pictures, and Valley Mill, whatever that is, they've done a ton of rehab. So I just wanted to highlight that to me, it's not just the age that it's built, that if you renovated it in 2000, I feel like that makes a big difference in rental housing stock.
It most certainly does. And the Census Bureau doesn't pick that up. What they will pick up is if a house that is a function of a tear down, that will be the year that it was built. But rehab doesn't affect year built in the census data. Where it does show up is in assessors' records. Because my experience is that typically assessors have two date fields in their database. One is the actual year built, if they know it, and the second is effective year. And typically in that effective year, you'll pick up where there's been, some change. And I'm pretty sure we have both fields in the data that that Jeff gave us. So I'll check.
Yeah, I would just want to. I was just going to clarify that. Yeah, it is in the assessor's data, and if you have access to it, you should be able to map the actual year built versus the estimated year built, or the effective year built. And I think what you'll see is that if you go back a slide, what you're showing as or two slides, what you're showing as the newest housing is actually concentrated towards the middle on the and that I think I could be wrong, but I think the northern western is also older. It's just getting caught up.
Well, that certainly could be, Jamie, because these are block groups. These aren't parcels. So the beauty, of course, of mapping this from assessor's data is that you can see the individual parcels. And the map is too small to do that, but we can do it.
So, Jamie, I just want to make sure that, because I know it was in our RFP, so Jamie and Judy, we can get accurate data on the age of the rental, not based on its development, but okay. Because I know that the picture you just did, I think it's Pine Valley Realty, I think they did rehab on almost all of their units in 2000. And so I just think they are a major rental player. I don't know, they've got like something like 750 units. They have a lot in Easthampton. I just want to make sure it's reflected accurately. Okay.
Yeah, and we, even if I didn't have actual data, I mean, sometimes I will work with just anecdotal information. I mean, if you know that there's been a lot of investment in improving the rental stock, we would say that even if we couldn't quantify it, because people need to know. But But I think really the best source for trying to get a handle on this is the assessor's data. What we typically do with assessor's data is we'll pull out, say, the single family homes, because you sort of have to deal with a constant land use. And we'll just trace what's happened over time in terms of how large the average lot is, how large the dwelling unit is, how tall the building is. I mean, it's a way to kind of almost get at what's happening with neighborhood character as development unfolds. And you could do that with assessor's data much better than something as blunt as the block group information from the Census Bureau.
No, I think that's perfect. I think anecdotally, we actually do have an old rental stock, but and I think even a 2000 renovation is still 20 years old, but I just want to make sure that the 750 units are registered, or however many. I'm making up the number.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you. I will just add one thing that might frustrate you a little bit. Assessor's data for multifamily developments or for multifamily properties rarely has the number of units. The assessor is focusing on a parcel. So you'll know that, say, there's a multifamily building on the parcel, and you'll know because of how it's coded whether it's 3 units or 4 to 9 units, but you won't necessarily know how many units are in that building, because that's not the way the assessor assesses it. The assessor assesses multifamily property based on income generated by it. So just so you know, it may not be possible for me to get a super accurate picture of just how many units have been affected by, say, rehab and renovation, but I can certainly talk about properties that have.
And our assessor's data.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Our assessor's data is exactly as you said. It has that range of 4 to 8, or more than 8. So
that they're using the state codes, and so I mean, but it's helpful even if you can't talk about the number of units. If you can say, well, in the sort of multifamily inventory here, 8 out of 12 parcels have been renovated in the last decade. That's important. So even if it's not units, it's like, there's something happening on the investment side that's worth looking at. We also can pick up some of this from CoStar. So anyway, shall I move on? Okay, we'll move on from this too. So again, I just put these block group maps together because it's important to us as analysts to not kind of paint a picture of, here's Easthampton and this is kind of what's happening town-wide, because that's not really accurate. There are places in your community where you tend to have older adults. Now, arguably, because you're a small community, and even though people may think you're sort of dense, you're not that densely developed, your block groups tend to be kind of big on the outlying parts of town. So these may be picking up things that aren't all that helpful to you because you know what's on the ground. But I just want to point out that there are parts of town where you tend to have older adults living. And some of this may be because a particular block group has a couple of housing authority properties that are age restricted. It may just be that you've got older single family homes where people have lived for 40 years and they haven't sold them yet. My point is just there are parts of town where you have younger populations than older. And so not everybody is sort of affected by market conditions in quite the same way. And similarly, the kids in your community tend to be sort of more present in certain parts of town than others. This is almost sort of like the reverse of the population 65 and over. I don't know if any of these maps are a surprise to you, but they were certainly interesting to us to try to get a sense of, where are people moving, where are they living, and why might there be more families with kids in certain parts of town? Is it because it's single family home stock? Is it because there's a public school there? I mean, any number of things can kind of shape that.
Well, that big blob in the middle is Williston, I believe.
Okay. Okay, I shut the parcels off on these maps so that they wouldn't be too busy.
And I didn't mean to refer to Williston as a blob, but you know what I mean. That dark area right in the middle next to 141, I believe, is Williston.
Okay. Yeah, and this is truly population under 18. This isn't households. This isn't household base. It's actually number of people, so it could pick up Williston. This map is just sort of showing kind of where do your families live. So again, the darker the shade, the higher the concentration of family households, which, to some extent kind of relates to that previous map of, where the kids, well, you've got a concentration of households with children in this area and down in here. And then when you go to the next slide, you can kind of see, well, we tend to got more families in certain parts of town than others, as opposed to here where you don't.
I'll just say, in the previous map that you just had, there's something, I think Tom kind of pointed out, there's something a little off with that center.
Okay.
So by and large, that's Nonotuck Park. So it's like Nonotuck's 360 acres, and then there's an elementary school.
Yep.
And then there's part of Williston, like athletic field. So there's something a little off with that center blob. Like it doesn't really correlate to a lot. I mean, there's like one subdivision in there, but the rest of it kind of looks, like it would be accurate. There's that one darker image there. I think it's.
Well, the treehouse organization is in that darker blob in the middle there. So I know that they have a large number of.
Is it this one, do you mean?
South of that, the maroon, yeah.
It's one of those little cul-de-sac roads there on that.
Yeah, and maybe that's enough for, because they have a lot of, the Treehouse Foundation does work with children, and then maybe that's enough to skew that block, because the rest of it is just parks and fields.
Mm-hmm. This is really helpful, by the way.
I guess, Jeff, what I was looking at is, if I look at the Route 10, am I looking at that correctly? Is Route 10 that line coming down?
Yeah, this is Route 10.
Oh, so you're not, where is it coming south?
It's coming from Northampton, yes.
Right, but are you showing it going to Southampton?
Yes, down here, right?
Yeah.
It's like this.
Right there, okay. Okay, so I was off on that Williston a bit, because Williston would be adjacent to Route 10.
Okay.
But maybe not, to Jeff's point, I think that might be more of the park.
Okay. Okay. I will tell you that even if I shut off all these colors, you can read your community by the roads, because the sort of western part of the community has many more kind of curvilinear subdivision streets, whereas the eastern side, kind of heading up toward Northampton, does not. So you can almost read kind of the age of development and evolution of development in Easthampton just by looking at the roads. But census data are more interesting. So anyway, moving on here, this, I think I showed you this already. This is sort of just kind of illustrating where you tend to have concentrations of families as opposed to relatively few. Now this is looking specifically at families headed by single women. Do we have, I'm embarrassed to tell you, my GIS person mapped your subsidized housing inventory. I don't have it in this presentation, but I'm wondering, in those sort of darker areas, do we have quite a few affordable units or multifamily dwellings in those darkest areas?
Darker areas on the south. Oh, sorry.
Those dark areas is my neighborhood, and we don't have a whole lot in there.
But on the side of 141, Tom, across from, on the west side of 141 in that lower lot, there are a lot of multifamilies. There's that big apartment complex down National
One.
Oh yeah, sure. No, we have a lot of multifamilies.
Yeah.
I don't know about the subsidized nature of them.
Well, I don't know what would make
Judy,
these.
I'll say the area on the map that's shown as 141, the Housing Authority has a large number of units in that block group.
Yes.
And I don't know specifically what the Housing Authority population split is, but I do know that because it's mostly age restricted, I would have to assume that there are more single female heads of households living in those in that area, and that would be I forget the total number of units. I think it's like 300 units. Does that sound right?
188.
108. Thank you, Jeff. So I don't know if that's enough to skew.
Oh, it certainly could be, because some of these areas are not that big. The SHI map has a fair number of dots on it representing units, and sort of larger dots kind of in this general area.
Yeah, that is also historically the those 3 or 4 block groups are the historically have been the lower income block groups. They're the older neighborhoods with the older housing stock.
Yep. Yep. And then we did, based on the ACS data, we just tried to figure out, well, where are the vacant units? And there wasn't a lot vacant, by the way. It's kind of interesting, but the largest vacancy that was, the block group with the largest number of vacancies, or the largest percentage rather, was up in here. And up here and here, there were vacant units that were generally more for sale than for rent. No vacancy showing up in these block groups, and obviously very little here. So, again, there are some parts of the community where vacancy is simply more pronounced. And
but Jeff, just real quick, Jeff, where is that maroon one? Is that like High Street, Summer Street, that area?
This is Ferry Street. This is Pleasant Street.
So those are the side streets off of Pleasant Street.
This is Holyoke Street.
That's like Briggs Street and stuff off of Adams.
No, it's off of Pleasant, from what you were saying.
Yeah, so Adams and Everett Street, and then like basically along Mill Pond where the graveyard is that dark red area.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't understand the high number of vacancies there, but.
When was that data pulled from, Judy?
This is 2018 American Community Survey data.
Unless you're counting the cemetery.
No. No.
I can kind of speak to that a little bit, just because I live in this neighborhood.
Okay.
So this neighborhood is mostly quadplexes, several rows of them on several streets. And just within the last 2 or 3 years or so, the landlords of these buildings have been phasing out their tenants and then remodeling the entire inside of them. So this is a pretty big project that's been going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, even just on my little cul-de-sac here, there's probably 12 to 16 units that are completely empty that have been for months right now.
Okay.
That was going to be my question, if it would include units that were not on the market to be rented, so offline units, like what Brad is saying.
Yes, I didn't try to break them down in this map because I was trying to keep it from getting too busy, but we do have the breakdown for that, and the there's actually very little for sale in that housing vacancy number. I'm actually just trying to get back to this. Hold on. There's very little for sale in there. It was kind of dramatic. There were several units for rent. There were some units that had been sold or rented, but they weren't occupied yet. There was a fairly conspicuous number of units that were just sort of other vacant, which typically is, for some reason, the owner is holding them not to rent them. And that can be because people are getting ready to remodel. It can be because the units are being held for some kind of seasonal use, like migrant farm workers or something. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why units may just sort of fall into that other vacant category. But I do recall seeing quite a bit of it.
Brad, have you seen any of those remodeled units or those landlords looking at converting those to condos?
No, at least the areas around me, I think that, the buildings themselves, I believe, are from the 1930s. They're very old and run down, and I think just it's time. This whole neighborhood needs a facelift, and, they've just been remodeling them, and then people are slowly moving in.
Okay.
But yeah, it's nothing's been for sale anywhere around here.
I would just echo what Brad's saying. I think that's one of our oldest, especially as you go closer to the rail that's shown as a railway here, the Mill Pond. I mean, that's, described as like one of our oldest neighborhoods. And there's there's like 2 or 3 pockets of one of our old, and they're mill housing. I mean, that was built when the mills were active and people were that was the mill housing. So it is kind of original.
Okay. And then I just wanted to put this up to compare the median household income by block group to the median non-family household income. So again, the darker block groups are the higher incomes. So on the non-family side, you've got a higher income group up here, which is causing the median household income not to fall too far down. This is sort of like your highest non-family area. And it just, breaks down from there. These are relatively high non-family incomes. And then this light yellow is a not reported block group. But the lowest non-family incomes are in these two light orange areas. And that has an impact on the median household income overall. As it does for the community as a whole. So I'm not really all that surprised to see this.
There's a lot. I think there's a lot in those maps right there. I was just kind of looking at it. There's a lot there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And I sometimes find the mapping of the census data a little bit frustrating because you know that when you're dealing with areas kind of this big, you're missing something. But again, it's sort of like this one constant source that we have available for doing this kind of work. So, and this is the smallest geography at which the income data are available. If you get below the census block group, you can't get it. So we're working with what we have. So you may be all familiar with this, but in case not, I just wanted to kind of put up what the current income limits are so you can see kind of what we're talking about today in terms of extremely low, which is that group that's 30% or below median income. Very low is 31 to 50%, and low income is 51 to 80%. So those are the income limits for eligibility to live in a unit that's on the subsidized housing inventory. And I want to show you this because
I don't mean to slow any of this down. You know what would be nice in that slide is to have those percentage ranges.
Oh,
just for the way my brain works is it's hard for me to put all that together, but that is a useful conversation piece and something that's going to be really important for people to understand. The comparison from those percentages and the groupings, and then what it actually means when you talk about someone with a job and what they make.
I actually, in my public education slides, Jeff, I often have a slide that is just kind of a picture of here's a type of job.
Yeah, that's going to be really important. I mean, a lot of people on this call get it or understand it and can make sense of that, but for the broader, broader people, broader sets of people who want to look at this and understand what we're talking about, that would be super helpful, I think.
Yeah, I can easily do that. I didn't do it for tonight, but I often do that for public education slides because I think people need to kind of see that extremely low income is not this scary thing. It's actually like the person who serves you coffee at Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, and people just need to kind of be able to put a job next to an income level. So I will add that. It's just not in here tonight. I'm going to show you in 2 slides kind of what is affordable at these income limits, but there's an intervening slide here with the supply numbers, and I just wanted to compare what the 2018 American Community Survey says that you have for housing units versus the 2010 census, which is what was reported in the last housing production plan. And what the ACS is suggesting is that there's actually been a drop in owner-occupied units. And the growth in renter, I guess, doesn't really surprise anybody because you've had some rental development. But there is this reported increase in vacancy, which is kind of alluded to in one of those earlier slides. This is the breakdown of the vacant units. So this will tell you that there's been an increase in the number of units on the market for rent. I'm not all that surprised to see that because you've had some recent rental development. It will contribute to a rental vacancy figure. There are units that have been sold, but people haven't moved into them yet, and that number's up. The number of units for sale is down, and this was something I wanted you specifically to see. the Census Bureau is estimating that you've lost some units that were held for seasonal use, but you've had an increase in, quote, other vacant. And other vacant can be anything from the owner is just choosing to withhold the unit. Maybe they're gradually emptying a building out because they're going to rehab it, as someone had mentioned earlier. In some tourist economies, we see that kind of count often because they're guest houses, so there's any number of things that feed that other vacant, but that number is up. But I'm wondering what your reaction is to that reported reduction in owner-occupied units.
I guess my initial reaction is just that ACS data versus census data is just, we're looking at estimates and a full count. And I know that often there's problems when you start to compare census data and ACS data. So,
could it be homeowners that, whatever reason, moved away and rented their homes instead of selling them?
It's possible.
That's what I was thinking, actually. Just the opportunity to move and rent. I think it's part of that. I would agree with what Tom said.
Well, I was poking around on Zillow and a couple of other websites just to get a sense of kind of what's out there for rent and for sale, and I was surprised by the number of condos and single-family homes that were listed as available for rent.
Mm. So, Judy, real quick.
Yes.
So if I'm reading this correctly, Easthampton has added 116 living units in the past in this 9-year period.
That's what the Census Bureau is estimating, and
so that's like 12 units a year that we've added. I guess go figure why we have a shortage of how does that compare to other cities and towns in Massachusetts, do you think?
Well, actually, I think you've added more than that, and it just hasn't caught up with these folks yet. Now, let me also tell you what actually happens at the Census Bureau. The housing count number is a function of the survey sampling process that is used to generate ACS data, but it's also based on records from your own building department. So if you're building, and this is a very common things that happen, so just bear this in mind. If a building department reports a new structure as single family or two family that's actually multifamily, then the estimated number of units that have been added since 2010 will be depressed. This often happens. You just cannot imagine how often this happens. And then it sort of gets caught up again with the next decennial census, the actual count. To Jamie's point, there is always this hazard always in comparing ACS and decennial census data. The decennial census is an actual count. The ACS is an estimate. What I did in this case to stay away from the biggest hazard was to avoid an ACS period that overlaps with the last census, which is generally what the Census Bureau recommends. The Census Bureau doesn't frown on the comparison. What they do encourage us to do is to avoid comparing two kind of periods where there's an overlap. An ACS table is based on a 5-year trend. That's the other thing you should know, is that it's kind of they're sort of taking what's happened over 5 years and then reporting it this year as kind of an average condition. So if some new multifamily units were built in, say, 2017, they're not getting picked up yet. They will get picked up with the next ACS or the next census count. But
we are higher than that, right? So in one of your first graphic, because I know Jamie did a lot of the research when we were seeking our housing choice designation.
Yep.
Jamie did a lot of the rectifying between the bad data and the building permit data, and a lot of it didn't align. But we were at 288 in at least 5-year look back. So
right, but that data was only reported to the state. It wasn't then corrected to the census.
Right.
And Judy's not pulling census data, so it's still going back to that bad data that was reported by the building department.
Right. So
we'll just say, sorry.
This happens a lot, just so you know.
When it comes to the ACS thing, another thing to keep in mind is that 2018, yeah, like Judy said, it really means 2013 through 2018.
Yes, it does.
We probably looked a lot different in 2013 than we did today.
Yep.
Do today in a lot of ways.
Right, and we need to kind of stay away from 2013 because that would be picked up in this. So, you know, again, there's always kind of this hazard. I guess the thing I want you to think about is, how do I say this? Notwithstanding that there are some errors in the data, do the trends overall make sense or not? I think that's the bigger question. And we used to ask this question even when we didn't have the ACS and we were comparing one decennial census to the next. You know, does it make sense to you on the ground? Because if it's something doesn't make sense, we really need to know that.
I guess there might be a difference between make sense or kind of opens our eyes about something, because that shift, and I could look at it as a shift from owner to renter. I mean, down 270, but up 328. I mean, I could almost argue that, you know, 270 owners decided to rent their homes that drove that shift. But does it make sense? Maybe. But does it surprise me? Definitely.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me that we have more vacancies in 2018 than 2010, right after the economic collapse.
But then you have to look at what it's comprised of. I mean, the increase in the number of units for rent doesn't really surprise me at all because you've had new rental development.
And I would just say, I mean, it seems to be like it's almost insignificantly different because we look at percentages and we're talking a 5.2% vacancy rate in 2010, and we're talking a 5.7% vacancy rate in 2018. You know, the total number of vacant units is it's like 48 units difference. I mean, that is a statistical that's an error, the statistical error, something that when we're looking at the way that the two different data sources were generated. So it seems accurate. It seems accurate to me, but it doesn't seem like it's indicating a negative trend or a positive trend. It just seems like it's similar enough that I would think it's the same.
There's the 56 other vacant units as well. It would seem to be over 100 total increased vacancies.
That could be multifamily owners holding units off the market because they're doing rehab. I mean, I'm just guessing. That's the kind of thing that will drive that number. There are other examples which I'm happy to get back to you on, but that kind of holding units off the market and things like seasonal cottages and so forth, that tends to show up in other vacant.
What about snowbirds, like someone who is here, let's say 5 months of the year, in Florida in 6 months?
Yep.
And I live in a 55 and older complex, and there's about 6 people or 7 families that do that. They're away for 6 months in a day.
Yep. So people, one of the questions for the survey respondent is, are you living today in your usual residence? Or is your usual residence somewhere else? And so it's really on the survey respondent to say, no, this is my principal residence, or it isn't.
Right.
Judy, the part that doesn't make sense to me is the vacant 439. Is that 439?
Yeah.
Owner or rental units?
It's all vacant.
All vacant. That number is, I guess I'm not buying that number. I mean, maybe in 2018, but if, it might have been 2 years ago, time flies, but conversations I've had with realtors, there haven't been like 25 homes for sale in Easthampton in the past couple of years. And I can't believe there's that many. Again, conversations I've had with landlords have said they've had no vacancies.
So the for sale number is down. In that vacancy total, that number of units contributing to that are for sale is down. So that makes sense to me.
All right, okay. I guess I was looking at the total, the 439.
That's okay. I know it's like, that's why I wanted to put up here what this is comprised of. So under 439, where you see 152, 4210, those are all numbers that contribute to that 439.
All right.
You know what just occurs to me? That in 2018-ish, we had that new apartment building on Cottage Street that wasn't yet filled. And I'm wondering if that got picked up.
It could be. It very well could be. I could go and...
Was that's a significant amount.
Yep.
There was also, so if, and just to riff off that for 1 second though, because if this is actually 2013 through 2018.
It's 2014 to 18.
Right, because we also had, that was when the units on Parsons Street were under construction and then occupied.
Right.
So that was our 100 units of affordable, just as an example, were under construction during that period. Right. I mean, I look to Jamie and Jana, but I think there might be something to that was a big chunk of our new units getting constructed. Maybe, I don't know. It seems high. That does.
But would they be counted as vacant if they're under construction because they wouldn't have had an occupancy permit?
Yes, because if they're under construction, they are counted.
They would have showed like as a building permit.
Pardon me?
Well, they would have showed as a building permit perhaps, and then not occupied.
Right. I can certainly tell you with the decennial census, if the census takers are out looking around in the community and there's a house under construction, they're counting it as a dwelling unit.
I just want to be conscious of the time. It's almost 8, and I just want to make sure Judy gets to get through all of her slides. There was just lightning.
Oh, is it that late? God.
So I know this is all very exciting, but I also think we actually have more on the agenda after this for the housing partnership to discuss. So I just want to make sure Judy can get to all our slides.
Well, I have a few more slides, so why don't I go through those, okay? I wanted to just, if you remember back to those income limits I showed earlier, I wanted to just sort of calculate, so what's actually affordable to people in these income ranges? And for the extremely low and very low, I assumed rent. And so I calculated the rent. It's, it's 1/12 and 30% of that. That's what's affordable. When you get to the low income cohort, which is 80% of median, I calculated both sale prices and rent. I went up to like a household of 5. And I just wanted to put these up here for you to think about when you're trying to think about who most needs help and where are the greatest needs in your community. Do the extremely low income who do live in your town, your city, is there stock out there that's affordable at that level? Is there stock out there that's affordable to people who are very low income? And bear in mind, those are household size adjusted. So, there may be some units that are in that range cost-wise, but are they suitable for a household of the size that's shown there? I mean, a rent that might be affordable to a household of 4 is not going to be affordable to somebody who's a single-person household. So if you then just kind of read across the chart and you look at the sale prices for single-family homes and condominiums, the condo prices, by the way, just to be clear, are adjusted for condo fee assumptions. That's kind of what's affordable for someone who wants to buy in your community, who's a low or moderate income household. And so what does the supply look like in those ranges?
Doesn't exist.
Right.
So I live in a condo association, and I actually have an affordable unit myself. And it's hard. We have affordable units sometimes that we can't fill for months and months because to find someone who is, below that income limit, who can also afford to buy a condo and have a down payment is difficult.
Yes. Yes, and that is true all over the Commonwealth. That's not just you guys, and it's not just your region. It's true everywhere. I'm old enough to remember when we started doing 40B home ownership developments. It was in the mid-1980s. And I had this terrible fear at the time. I was, of course, a much younger woman back then, but I had this terrible fear that we were going to build a base of affordable housing that we couldn't maintain. Because it just stands to reason that housing prices will go up but incomes rise and fall with the economy. And are we going to end up in a situation where what's affordable to me today at a very low interest rate, when I go to sell, if the economy is tanked and the interest rates are up, am I going to be able to sell my unit? And we have this issue all over Massachusetts of affordable units that ultimately end up being sold to folks who are, quote, over income. They have to agree to keep the restriction. But it's very hard with the ownership stock to market it to people who are income eligible, because the prices continue to go up and typically, you know, up accelerated against what's actually happening with incomes. You know, the household, we look at household formation rates to try to understand what's likely to happen with demand. Just based on the trends that I was able to find, and frankly, what I was able to glean from projections from Esri, it looks like the demand is about 60 or so households over 5 years. There seems to be a disconnect to us between the available supply and potential market interest, such as, you know, older and younger adults are not necessarily looking for a single-family home with a large yard, and yet, you know, if you just look at where the land is in your town and what your zoning says, I'm not sure your zoning is in sync with what's happening with demographics. Your existing seniors don't have a lot of options. And I got to tell you, the answer isn't just building some over 55 development, because in town after town that I've worked in, the over 55 communities, the cost of the housing is really way above what the seniors who actually live in your community and actually need a downsizing option can afford. So there's a real disconnect between what the market produces, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but there's a disconnect between what the market will produce and what's actually affordable. So if they don't have something they can downsize to that they can afford, they won't downsize. You have a lot of seniors with very low or extremely low incomes. And as I said, over 55 developments don't provide a choice for those people.
So Judy, I'm sorry, Tom, are you suggesting that our zoning isn't in line? Are you suggesting that we infill our zoning? Is that the answer you're seeing?
I think infill is something that needs to be looked at. I think you need to also look at the necessity to keep as many districts as you have favoring single-family homes.
Judy, I think I've been a huge proponent of over 55 development, and not as an end all, but as one more piece of the puzzle, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think the one piece I could be dead wrong here. I think when a person over 55, what gives them the ability to potentially move into one of these developments is the sale of their existing home. Yep. And the sale of that existing home may in fact be a home that's in that 250 category.
Yep. Could
that gets them over the hump to get into the over 55 and provides that lower cost home out on the market. And what happens is, because we don't have that option, they either move to over 55 developments in surrounding towns, or they stay in their home, which stops that churn, if you will, of making those homes more affordable.
I don't have any issue with over 55 development, but I can tell you that the delta has to make sense. Correct. And if my older home that was built in 1942 is not going to yield enough money for me to be able to buy into that over 55 development, I'm not going to go there. And what I see in market after market that I work in is that what it takes to actually buy into one of those developments often exceeds the value of the older home that someone's been living in for 50 years. That there is a disconnect between the actual supply of units that could be sold and the cost of the new ones that are being produced.
And again, I just don't want to, because that thunder's getting really close now. I don't want to beat it to death, but there's a ripple effect in this whole food chain of housing. So, you know, while I might sell my house for $300,000, somebody who's upgrading from their 220 home might buy mine, and now that 220 home is on the market. what we're missing today is that whole chain reaction in the housing market.
Yep. Agreed. And I don't mean to put down the opportunity to develop over 55 housing. I'm just saying that there are markets of older homeowners for whom that's not going to work.
Totally agree. And it's only one piece of this whole puzzle.
Exactly. So kind of another issue that I think complicates the addressing of housing needs for lower income seniors is that the state's priority for most of its subsidies is around family housing and to a lesser extent disability housing. And there are honest, fair housing reasons for those policies to exist. But it does make it harder to develop very low income or very affordable, rather, senior housing. And it's not that tax credits never go into elderly housing, of course they do, but the state's priority is family housing, and that's where most of those subsidies are going. And so, my final comment is I think we really need to be thinking honestly here about how can the city unlock the development potential, if not of its land, which often is in places where you may not want to see a lot of additional development, but how do you make it possible for reinvestment in existing areas to make market sense? And I think when the ratios work, the market will follow, so to speak. But I'm not sure that the zoning you have, even with the seeming advantages that it may offer, say in your downtown area or some of those adjacent neighborhoods, I'm not sure it works. And I'll tell you right now, your parking definitely doesn't work. Your parking requirements are atrocious. Sorry, but it's just really they need a look. So that's my opinionated piece here for the end of the evening. I think that this is Jamie, you've probably done a much better map of this than I did. I was just trying to get a handle on kind of where the land is, and all that pink land is sort of maybe vacant, but it's public. I don't know enough about your farm and forestry properties to know how many may be subject to, say, an APR or some kind of restriction. So I just did not color them as vacant because I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. But, there's not a whole lot of vacant land, it looks to me, that's easily developable. The sort of darkest green on there is what the assessor is calling vacant residential developable or possibly developable. It's not that much.
I guess the other issue that's a fact of life for Jeff and Jamie and probably every other community in the United States is as soon as you look at some of these projects that might infill a little bit and provide additional housing, you get 500 residents showing up in the neighborhood who are beating up the planning department because they don't want it to go, not in my backyard. So, Jamie, I guess I'm thinking of, or Jeff, I'm thinking of Colonial Avenue, if that's the street it's on, Plymouth Avenue, whichever one. I don't even know if you've heard from the neighborhood yet on the Loudville Road project, but you probably will. So, while there's the need, and we all agree on the need, the community does not seem to embrace development.
And I respect that. I'm sure it is really difficult, but frankly, as an investor, if I were looking at your community versus some other one and I saw the special permit hurdles I have to go through to get an approval, and, once I'm into a special permit realm, it means I'm inviting my neighborhood to come in and trash my project.
Yep.
And I think that is something that really needs to be looked at is, you've basically through your zoning given a heck of a lot of authority to people who don't own a piece of property.
And that's definitely like one of the, that's one of the next steps, right? So to help us remove some of those barriers. What is next on for the project? And then I think we lost Jana actually. And sensitive to the partnership actually has other
She's
stuff.
coming back.
She's coming back.
She just texted me to say that her computer shut off and she's trying to log back in.
Okay, that's good. All right. So then, I don't know how much more time we have with the group, but I just want to be clear, right? So that is part of the, the request that we have for the comprehensive part of the housing study is to help us. Yeah. And I think, my request would we get, I think we should have another separate discussion of that, because what my hope and goal is that with the people around the table here, that's terrible, not true, around the Zoom call, we really want to try to adjust or get recommendations to adjust the zoning that's going to be doable, like, and really kind of reflect the local kind of understanding of what we think we can get to change. We do have a city councilor on the call, and generally speaking, there's a lot of support right now to make these kinds of changes. And I just put one last quick plea in here that we believe, and maybe it's not clear that it supports in the data directly, but the idea of the accessory dwelling unit, that's kind of, our conversations have been that's a very easy, relatively easy first step to remove all the barriers to an accessory dwelling unit. And that's, like, in terms of triage, that's one of our first goals. And then the more complicated rezoning to remove special permitting, definitely really important, high on the list. So obviously you're seeing that. So the zoning, yikes. So that's all. I just wanted to make sure we kind of move forward, and I'm just not clear on the next steps and how you want to approach that.
Well, what I'm trying to finish, and what I've been trying to finish all week, is the narrative piece of the housing needs assessment, because bear in mind that the HPP, to be submittable to DHCD, has to have the housing needs assessment, goals, and strategies. How many of those strategies that you and we're all talking about right now have to be in the HPP versus tied more to what Dodson and Flinker are doing? I think it's maybe an offline conversation you and I should have. I don't know how much you want to have packed into the housing production plan versus other deliverables that are coming out of this project. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. I think, let's talk about that, because I think it's opportunity.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, we probably can't go on all night, even though I could probably sit here for hours. But these are just some questions that I think we're going to want some input and direction from you guys about the zoning. Yeah, I flinched when I saw 230 pages. I thought, oh my goodness sakes.
I think it is helpful, though, for the objective third party, Jeff, and this is not a reflection on our planner, it's a reflection on, it seems like when you add more zoning or planning development requirements, you just keep piling on. And I think it's helpful for an objective third party to say, yikes, has anybody stepped back far enough and look at your zoning ordinances? Or has anybody stepped back and look on the special permit process? And I think when I hear Judy say, if I was looking for a place to put a development and I took a look at your process, I would probably look at a different town. Yeah. So to me, that's a valuable third-party objective assessment of the complications we put into the process here in Easthampton. And they were in place long before Jeff and Jamie were around, believe me.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, your staff are just trying to get something done within the politics available to them. But there's a lot that could be kind of stripped out and simplified in that ordinance. And you might still have some really ticked off neighbors, but they're not going to be piling up in every single public hearing because, frankly, they shouldn't be.
Exactly. My sort of anecdotal comment's always been, if you don't want someone next to you, just buy the property.
Right.
And keep it open.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and I think it's good because, I think in the housing production plan, I think it's been observed that we want to reduce the barriers for affordable housing, and I think we always need to do that. But part of the goal of your work with us, Judy, is just housing in general, right?
Yes.
So we've never really had this third party kind of outside look in, at least with respect to housing. And so I think it is really valuable what Tom's saying. And I think it's time to really kind of look pretty hard at what would be, we want to try to pick stuff that's going to be able to pass the actual whole process of a zoning change. So it's not just take the whole entire town and remove every process, but it's to find the specific areas where we think the market would support more units and it's desirable in terms of close proximity to things. And so a little more strategy will help us, I think, get to some kind of finish line on making it a little easier.
Okay.
I just want to chip in real quick from the council's perspective and say that when we're talking about passing, like,
you might just want to run some stuff by some counselors before you make any assumptions about what would or wouldn't pass, because there's a real desire to get stuff done, and there's also a lot of trust on the part of the council in Jeff and Jamie. You know, if you see
Great. That's good.
is going to like help make this a more affordable community for our constituents, you know, there's a real I think that there's a way to get it through. Like, I don't think that there's anything that's just off the table, non-starter right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. And it's data. And what we're trying, we pitched this. It was all presented, and the goal was data-driven too. So if we have the new data to show what our needs are and the areas that we can focus on, I think that's what the mayor, you know, that's where the mayor's support is a data-driven study to help us unlock some housing, you know, new growth. So.
And Jeff, one of the ways I've always looked, and believe me, I'm not going to look at this because I can't look at 233 pages of zoning, but if someone was building out a zoning ordinance for Easthampton today, what would it look like from scratch?
Oh, I thought about that. Oh my goodness.
And under the heading
idea how much I've thought about that working on this project.
Under the heading of be careful what you ask for, it could end up being 453 pages.
Yeah.
So, but wouldn't it be great if it was 50 pages?
So what's our next step? What should we do next? Sorry,
I need to get the housing needs assessment narrative done. That is my next step. I have got to unload that. It's just killing me. So I want to get that done, and I need to check in with Peter, which I did not get a chance to do today, where they are on their site studies. So I'm going to have to circle back with you. I'm not trying to put off your question, but I needed to focus on getting these slides ready, so I did not talk to Peter, but I know they're working on it. I have some initial slides from them about just the site study, so it's in progress. But
oh, sorry, Judy. And we have, we do have a timeline and target for the housing production plan, right? So do you think we would need one additional meeting before the end of August to review anything or not? I don't know. I know that we have a longer run for the whole project, but the housing production plan has some kind of timeline attached to it in August.
Well, it does. That's my only worry. I mean, I think we probably are going to need another meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I just need to really hunker down and write. There's just no other way around it. I need to just sit here and write.
And Jeff, what's the deliver? I mean, I know Judy has a deliverable at the end of the day, but what do we do with that deliverable? Is there some sort of public presentation of this, or is it just stuff to be used with zoning and planning and internal city usage?
Well, in order for it to be approved as a housing production plan, it does have to be submitted to DHCD. Mm-hmm. And there does need to be kind of a public hearing on that. They want to know from the planning board and the community's chief elected official that the plan is accepted locally.
Right, so we need to work on that. And then I think the RFP called for some other public, input and review session of the broader. So Tom, it's going to be one overall deliverable, which is a comprehensive housing plan, but one part is the housing production plan specific, and then there's going to be the rest of the work. So yeah, Judy and I can coordinate some stuff. I think it does maybe suggest another meeting, Jana, like before the next housing partnership. So you might have to talk about having another, like a separate meeting in August if we can work together on that, Jana. We can coordinate.
Yeah, we don't usually meet in August, so we can have a special meeting in August because our next scheduled meeting would be in September.
Okay.
But yeah.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience. And
I think you sent the slides. Can you make sure? Can I get these again and then figure out what to do with them? But yeah, and I'll coordinate. We'll come back together in August.
I'll send you full page slides.
Okay.
What I sent today was just kind of a handout version in case anybody wanted to look at it, but I'll send you full page slides.
Perfect.
And Jeff, could you maybe get those to Gwen?
Yes, absolutely. I'll share them. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Very exciting stuff.
Nice to see you all.
Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
The housing partnership still has a couple more things to discuss if Anna wants to continue that.
Don't hang up housing. Well, I think that we do, right? I think you do want to do this. I am gonna, the last part of the agenda is about the RFP. I'm gonna recuse myself from this discussion. So I can come back on at the end to say bye. I feel weird like leaving you entirely. But
I think it's fine.
Somebody needs to text me and tell me when to come back in.
Okay.
I don't think, do we need Jana to come back in? I think we're fine if you just say, see you later. I'm happy to sort of take over and do the closing of the meeting thing.
Okay, perfect.
I'm bossy like that, so it'll work out fine.
Thank you, Jackie. All right.
Anytime.
Thanks, everybody. This was really exciting. I know it was really long, but I think it was worth it. And I will talk to you soon.
Bye, Jana.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Jana.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so we're super excited to hear about updates on the RFP.
So the super excited is going to turn into super disappointed.
Oh, okay.
We did not get any responses.
What?
We had about 232 downloads of the RFP. So there was definitely interest in the proposal or in the process. And we got questions, but it did not translate into anyone actually submitting a proposal. So
wow.
At this point in time, we have some theories as to what happened and how some thoughts on how to proceed. But it's sort of, it's very disappointing. So
yeah. So
yeah, but we're optimistic, right?
Right.
I think there's some optimism. Like when Jamie talks about like the reasons what we think are kind of out there, I think we're optimistic still.
Okay.
So let me, I'll just sort of step through it a little bit, and that primarily from the organizations that we've had conversations with, there seemed to have been a capacity issue at those organizations currently. There was discussions that there were state grants that organizations were waiting to hear back from and feeling overextended and not willing to apply for another program, not knowing the results of those previous applications they had done, as well as capacity issues related to this being a short-term program. The need to scale up quickly and then scale back down afterwards didn't leave an organization who might have already issues dealing with organizational issues with COVID and just doing what they're already committed to do. So that was what we heard related to capacity. And then there's also some timing issues with, so the state had supplemented the RAFT funding. And RAFT was for households making 50% or less AMI. And they supplemented with a program called IRMA. It's the Emergency Rent and Mortgage Assistance Program. And that one is being for households 50 to 80%. So the wayfinders would have been given that money as well because they already handle RAFT. So we think that like we didn't hear back from wayfinders because they're already a timing and capacity issue with trying to handle that additional state funding and trying to that additional need. On the positive side, though, we heard the eviction moratorium, which was scheduled to end on August 16th, was extended until October 17th. So we are not as much of a crunch time-wise as we were thinking we would be at this point in time. So we do have a little bit more time. And because of the IRMA funds, we have those residents now, basically anyone making up to 80% AMI has an option for some rental assistance or some mortgage assistance. And hopefully that's enough to carry them through until we can revise and re-release the RFP and get a program administrator to start that process. Maybe in about a month or so, the conversations we had heard were that the capacity issues might be sort of there'll be less of a capacity issue. So that's sort of the very brief summary of everything. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and I'm happy to discuss. And maybe Jeff has some.
Yeah, I would just be curious if any of the committee members have any questions at this point. There's a couple more things I would just add, but I'm curious if anyone has questions.
Yeah, I guess what I would want to know is there a specific reason that the administration of this program has to be done by a local nonprofit? Like, I'm sure that maybe there's like an ethics issue, but why couldn't somebody within the city of Easthampton run that, and we can just do it ourselves?
So the reason why we could run this program entirely from the city. However, we cannot run this program we cannot pay for that person's staff time using CPA funds because we get into CPA law does not allow a municipality to supplant existing operating funds. So we could not, let's say, take my position and pay me to run this program. If I had capacity to run this program, or we had staff that could run it, then yes, surely we could do it in the city through administrative. We could potentially, if we go out to RFP again and we still get no responses, we could look at a possibility of bringing on a short-term staff to run the program. But that would be considered an expansion and not supplanting.
Okay, all right.
I think it's a good question, Brad. And Jamie and I talked about that today, actually, and I think it just speaks a little bit to the capacity issue of the idea, and it could be whether we're looking at the planning department or some other organization. I think it's a new program that has a lot of probably kinks to work out, and it takes a lot of people time to get it going. And so, I originally thought it would be hard to get potentially to try to hire someone in a short, for a temporary position, basically. And Jamie's observation was it might even be 2 people. But then the job market has shifted quite a bit. So there might be, people who have retired or people who, I think that's a good example, or people who may not be employed at the moment who might be qualified. But I think it's really just we talked about kind of just setting it up as like a triage. So the ideal scenario, I think, would be to try to wait a little bit and maybe learn from, because there's other communities that are doing this right now, and those programs are getting up and running. So we could potentially benefit from learning from watching those programs get up and running and figure out if there are things we might tweak in the next 4 weeks in that RFP that might make it a little easier. That's kind of the ideal scenario. And then if for some reason we go out, if we re-release it and we don't get any additional responses, then I definitely think we would double down on trying to hire someone new for some kind of temporary. So we are trying to look at 2 options moving forward, which is to re-release it or consider hiring someone internally, externally from new into the planning department for a short-term position. So I remain pretty optimistic, and I think it's just the other thing that I don't know that I think Jamie mentioned it, but I think it's real, is just COVID in general, taking people out of their office and working remotely. We all know that there's kind of this drop in productivity, and I think just to respond to the RFP, and then you look at it and then you really look at, can we actually administer this right now under our existing conditions? And I do think that was a lot of what may have impacted people's response.
Sure. And then just a quick follow-up. If it got to this point, would it also be doable to, I know in the program that I'm in right now, there's a lot of students who were looking for internships and assistantship opportunities that have been canceled just because the campus has really scaled down. So even in a worst case scenario, would it be possible to, reach out to some of the graduate schools and, have interns working underneath you and Jamie? Like, is that something that's also doable? I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing things here just to see.
I mean, I think it might be theoretically doable. It is because of the nature of the type of work. We want to be really careful about the people who are having administer it. And these are people who are applying, who are being threatened with evictions, and if someone isn't really careful about doing income qualifications, which is a really tedious process, you really want someone who knows what they're doing and understands tax forms and different kinds of. I mean, it's not just a simple process, and I wouldn't feel comfortable managing someone because I myself don't know enough about the income qualification process. But I would feel comfortable hiring someone who has been doing income qualification, has a history of it, maybe someone who recently retired from one of these organizations and is looking for some supplemental work. I think that's sort of, it would be, I mean, it's possible, but I think we'd ideally like to have someone who or an organization that has that experience.
Do you mind if I jump in just for a sec?
Yeah.
So
please.
as I think one of the things we were hoping for with the RFP was exactly what Jamie and Jeff are saying, is that an organization that already knows how to do this kind of thing would come in and do it, and that would be super helpful. I used to, not quite 20 years ago, but many years ago, I did income verification for Hilltown CDC, and it is complicated, and it's gotten more complicated since then. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from folks is we have two options. One is we reissue the RFP, we wait a bit, we see what we learn from the other programs like this, we reissue the RFP, and in the meantime, we let owners of these rental properties know about these other opportunities, because I heard back from Mr. Patel, and he was sounding like he's really struggling with folks who can't pay the rent at his properties. So maybe we make sure that I can reach back out to the landlords that I spoke with and just say, there's these other opportunities, tell your tenants about them. And then it sounds like the other opportunity is to see if we can, if you have to hire someone on a temporary basis to do the program, then we think about doing that. But it just seems, I like the idea of using a local organization that knows the community, has other opportunities to tell these clients about that they might need. There's that as well. So I think that those two options of waiting and reissuing, and then if we still don't get anything, then considering maybe hiring someone temporarily. But in the meantime, letting the landlords know about these other programs that are available to people that they might not know about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a good summary, Jackie. I think that's what, I realize I'm coming in and you guys did all the legwork, so I really appreciate that. I've been trying to thank you guys, publicly for this project. It's really great. Just the finest point on that, Jackie, is that there could be some tweaks we learn about that we might want to tweak the RFP a little bit before we reissue it. But that's where if we throw out for the time being, because we just learned this, I think yesterday, 4 weeks, and just see if there's things, and there is a network. Jamie, you guys have all probably been on calls, but even the DHCD and I forget Chris Clutchman's office, her title at the state, but they are gathering information about what other communities are doing. So we might be able to glean a little bit more in the 4 weeks, and then reissue it. So I think I remain really optimistic, and just anecdotally, the chatter we heard was it was really just kind of a little bit bad timing, just because there was an influx of programs and money coming at a couple of these agencies And I know just, one of, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, they had, like 10 grant applications outstanding at the time that the RFP was out. So it would have been, I think, a little challenging for them to say, oh yeah, we can do this too, without knowing the full scale of what is coming at them. So I remain really optimistic, and I appreciate everyone's work. I think we wait a couple, maybe a month, and definitely reissue, and then we'll, we are hiring someone in the planning department. The focus is going to be land use, but I do think that we will be able to see what kind of the applicant pool that comes in. We have that application is open until July 31st, so I'm kind of curious to see what type of people applied, and maybe there is some information. Am I frozen?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, now he's frozen. Okay, so maybe let's give it a second to see if Jeff comes back, but I think that it's a good idea to wait a bit, see what we find out from the other organizations who are doing this work, reissue the RFP maybe in September, see if we get any takers, and then see what happens if not. Does that seem reasonable to those of us who are still here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the good news, kind of the silver lining, is that there's a lot of money out there that's available right now that people aren't really sure what to do with, and I feel like that never happens with nonprofit. So let's celebrate that while we have it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anything else that we should, I kind of feel like this is, we've been here for 2.5 hours and we don't usually do that. And I'm definitely flagging at this point. So anything else that we want to raise tonight, or do we feel like we are, Connie agrees with Jeff's points, by the way. Thanks, Connie. Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight, or do we feel like we're ready to adjourn?
I had nothing.
Okay.
Good. Thanks everyone for all your patience and sticking with it this incredibly long meeting.
Yeah. All right, folks. Good to see you all. We'll I'm guessing that Jana will send us out a notice about a meeting in August to have part 2 of the conversation around the housing production plan, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
You too. Bye.